Good morning, everybody. It's always nicest to be at a launch of something in your own hometown. So I'm particularly pleased to be here today to launch Wood Energy South, New Zealand's first renewable heat hub initiative, and hopefully the first of many. I mean, an obvious question is why choose Southland to launch what's going to be a national initiative? Well, Southland's actually ideally positioned to take a leadership role with this project for New Zealand as a whole, because the region has a forestry and wood processing industry that generates over 300,000 tonnes a year of potential wood fuel, and already has local industry and community-based services that are on the lookout for more sustainable and economic energy options. I know that you also have the benefit of a strongly supportive organisation in Venture Southland, whose networks and experience in the province are going to be vital to make this project work. And in fact, I can tell you that it was the enthusiasm of Venture Southland that in the end made us choose to launch this initiative here in the south rather than up north. Let me tell you a little about why the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, EECA, is involved. Now, of course, if you've never heard of us, we are the government agency responsible for improving energy efficiency generally across New Zealand. And just to give you an idea of the size of the prize, New Zealanders spend about $18 billion a year on energy. And of that, EECA have estimated that about $2.4 billion a year could be saved by putting in place, modern, contemporary energy efficiency solutions. That's a prize that's well worth going after. For those of you who already know something about EECA, you probably mainly associate us with electricity efficiency. And of course, that's a sensible place to start. And it has been probably our main focus over the last number of years. But what you might not know is that actually electricity represents only about a quarter of all of the energy that New Zealanders consume, only about a quarter. And of course, electricity is already mainly fueled by renewables in New Zealand: geothermal, water for hydro, and wind. So what makes up the other 75% if 25% is electricity? Well, it might surprise you that much bigger than New Zealand's spending on electricity is a spending on the energy we use for transport fuels, petrol or diesel in cars and trucks. And also bigger than electricity, and perhaps this is the most surprising one, also bigger than electricity is a spending on fuels used by industry and in schools, hospitals, swimming pools and the like to generate process heat, mainly in boilers. And it's those uses which this project targets. Of course, with transport and with process heat, improving efficiency or changing to renewable energy sources also reduces the use of fossil fuels, which means less reliance on imports, because nearly all of our fossil fuels actually are imported, although we produce it ourselves. Most of what New Zealand produces is actually exported. We import the fossil fuels that we use domestically. So it reduces reliance on imports, and of course we get lower emissions of carbon dioxide. So there is a big national benefit as well as a benefit to the individual businesses who make the change. And of course it's that national benefit that drives EECA's involvement in this project. I might say as an aside, nothing to do with this conference, but I think it's just worth mentioning that Southland is also leading the way in New Zealand with work on transport fuel efficiency, particularly the Richardson Group. But that's a different story. Today we're here to talk about process heat. Now, as New Zealanders, we are already world leaders in our use of renewable energy. We generate nearly 80% of our electricity from natural resources of wind, water and geothermal. But so far we have missed out in using what is one of our biggest and most readily available natural resources, wood. Only about 8% of our energy comes from bioenergy, yet we have access to a huge biomass resource. That's a lot of untapped wealth, and a lot of it is in Southland. Of course, we should acknowledge that generating heat from renewable sources often has a higher capital cost than for other fuels. But the longer plant life and lower input cost makes it a viable economic option, quite apart from the environmental benefit. Simply put, and building on Mayor Tim's comment, wood is a clean, efficient and renewable form of energy which has been used in fires for thousands of years, and it will never run out if we manage it sustainably, unlike coal or oil. Wood energy is also carbon neutral, as the carbon released through burning wood is equal to the carbon that is absorbed by trees during growth. Of course, I know that to some extent I'm preaching to the choir. Some Southland schools are already using wood energy, several are in the process of undertaking feasibility studies, while others are at the stage of tendering for wood chip boilers to be installed. I know that Environment Southland has installed a wood chip boiler as part of its leadership role in the community, and several notable Southland businesses have already converted to wood energy because of the long-term costs and performance benefits over traditional boiler fuels. And I know that you'll be hearing some of those success stories later today. The government's confidence in the success of this project is reflected in the $1.5 million of funding it has committed over the next 3 years to support work to convert commercial boilers to wood energy in Southland. Wood Energy South is already progressing well with forestry companies, heat plant suppliers, fuel suppliers, and heat plant users enthusiastic about the initiative. So this is a time of opportunity for Southland, and by your example, I might say our example as a Southlander, and by our example, an opportunity for New Zealand as a whole. I would like to thank Venture Southland, and in particular Steve Canny, who's been particularly involved in this, Kathy Jordan, who's the Renewable Heat Hub Project Coordinator, and the technical advisor Lloyd McGinty, for all their time and effort committed to the project so far. And also, of course, I'd like to thank Paul for his leadership through this process. I'd like to wish all of them and all of you all the best and all the success in making the country's first region-wide renewable heat hub a success. Thank you. Have a good day. Thank you.
We do have time for questions, so Tom, if you'd like to stay there. Maybe we've got some questions. I know you're a pretty big picture at the moment, but has anyone got any questions from that side of things?
I might say that Southland has always been particularly good, I think, at producing scrum halves. And in that tradition, any questions I receive will be very quickly flicked past, almost certainly to one of the other ECA representatives in the room. But I'll do my best. Any questions? Okay.
Just the big thing, like if you've got a fuel burner in there that's heating your workplace or whatever, and it's fuel based.
Yep.
The idea is you're looking to convert that into wood. Is that the key? You have to change the burner.
No, well, not always, but very often you do have to change the burner. And the reality is that a coal boiler is always likely to be smaller than a wood-fired boiler because coal is a more intense, it's got more intense energy. So you have that, as I mentioned before, you've got that initial capital investment very often, unless you're lucky enough to have a boiler that will deal with either. You very often get that initial capital investment up front. But the reality is that for many organisations, when they do the math, when they do the economic analysis, it still makes sense because over the long term, there's a payback. And obviously, particularly as your old boiler ages and you're looking at replacing it anyway, then almost certainly you would find that replacing it with a wood boiler, a wood-fired boiler, would be economic.